Welcome to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Asfalis Advisors and the Disaster Recovery Journal. Crisis management in today's world is ever-changing, and this podcast is our commitment to help you navigate successful outcomes for any crisis you may face. I'm your host, Vanessa Matthews. I specialize in providing insights and solutions for crisis, continuity, and resilience across industries from real estate and healthcare to terrorism in the airline and transportation worlds. No matter what industry you're in, this podcast will provide you the tools to build resilience in your organization. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Resilience Decoded podcast. Today, our title of the podcast is What a Remote and Hybrid Workforce Means for Cloud Security. I'm going to be talking to Justin Augat. But before we get started, I want to share a few resilience resources and reminders. In Asfalis News, if you would like to recommend a guest for the podcast, download our 5-step crisis strategy that you can use to navigate any business through any crisis. Or if you would like to request me, your host, as a speaker for an upcoming program, you can find all of those links in our show notes. In Disaster Recovery Journal News, the DRJ hosts a new webinar every Wednesday. They have a lot of upcoming events and conferences. In addition to, if you would like to have access to their journal, you can also check the show notes for those links. And lastly, if you enjoy those podcasts, we love hearing from you. If you want to send me a note on social media, just giving us a review of the value that we're providing, or we would greatly appreciate a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Play, wherever you may download your podcast. This helps us to know that we're adding value, and it also helps us to ensure that we find other great listeners and subscribers. So without further ado, Justin, how you doing?
I'm great. How are we doing today? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Look, I'm excited in much anticipation.
Well, again, I certainly appreciate the time with you folks today.
Absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into the world of IT?
Sure. Yeah, I always appreciate that question. I've been at Island now for a little over 3 years. It's been an unbelievable experience, quite frankly, just the ride we've been on here. But like many in marketing and product marketing, my first job was out of college was software engineering. So I was there, it was a while ago now. Company called EMC in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, that was bought by Dell. I was there for a while and exposed to other areas of the business. And they gave me great opportunities to move into other parts of the company. And I did have a few stints in other industries for some short periods of time, but you always come back to where your interests lie. And for me, that's IT, and it's IT marketing specifically. And
so a little birdie told me that you are from Germany.
Well, my family's from Germany. Yeah. That's I have an unusual, my last name is, you're not likely to run into many people with my last name. So if you do, I know them probably. That's likely. So
you know what part of Germany?
The Heidelberg area, actually. For anyone, it's south of Frankfurt. So,
okay. Yeah. I've flown into Frankfurt and I've been to Berlin.
There you go.
So, awesome. Well, great to have you. So, remote work has definitely evolved over the past few years, especially with COVID being a major contributor to that. And especially for tech companies that rely on secure internal servers to help make sure that their workforce can do their work, but also that the information that we're managing back and forth is also protected. And now this is so much more mainstream than what it may have been 5 to 10 years ago. How have you seen remote environments change over the past few years from your perspective?
I've been in tech now, for dedicated periods of time. The last stint, again, I did some other things in other industries, so it's not as relevant with other industries, but within IT for sure, remote work is an inevitability, and I think we're all seeing that now in other industries as well. It wasn't at the time, but for sure the last 10 years have been a lot of remote friendly IT companies. The reality is, as a hiring manager, if your business doesn't depend on a physical location, you're able to pursue the best talent wherever they are. So I really think it's as simple as that. So I personally think offering the ability to be remote is a competitive advantage from a talent perspective. Now, that said, not every company is built that way. We know that for sure. especially over the last few years, the folks that have had to be in the office or be in their workplace, for the benefit of everybody. Remote work's not always possible. So, there were some companies that were forced to adapt to those sort of logistics, how to work together, how to be productive, how to manage your time, those kinds of things. So, some went through some growing pains for sure. Even companies that had a remote, workplace, but went from, 50 or 60% remote to 100% remote, there were some growing pains there. But ultimately, I think we've established, at least in IT, that remote work can be extremely beneficial to the organization. People have learned how to become productive and be productive at home. And, as a result of that, that's, I think, a benefit for employees.
Yeah. Well, we are that company. We are 100% virtual, and everybody on our team is in a different state. I think it's like 5 different locations in 3 different time zones.
Oh, wow. There you go. Same here. I mean, the same here for sure. So there's lots of logistics. I mean, it's calendar logistics for sure.
Yeah. And I think like much more intentionality in terms of like relationship building.
Yeah. I think it's funny. Sometimes you got to turn on the camera, right? Because we're not able to go and, see people at a restaurant or in an office or something. You got to build that relationship. Phones are, I would say, okay. Zoom is good. Zoom with cameras better. And, in person is where we're all looking to get back to, right?
And small tangent, I teach a group of students at Savannah State, and I require them to have their video on. And what they shared with me was that they were happy to be held accountable to have a video, because some professors that they've experienced just don't require that. So they're not as engaged. So I mean, from a learning perspective, it's like they want to be engaged. They want to talk. They want to feel seen. And I think we might, we can get so relaxed
right,
to where like we're not being intentional,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, ultimately we're at work, and wherever that work is, if it's at your house or if it's at, wherever, shared space, whatever it is, it's work. And so be ready for work, be attentive, that's exactly the kind of growing pains that I think some people had to get used to, but I think for the most part, I think we're there. I really do.
Absolutely. So you talked about some of the other companies where, hey, you may not have had the opportunity to be 100%, remote. My husband's company is in financial services, so they had to go into the office. A large number of people did not, but significant people did, right? So with remote work being quote unquote a new normal, what are your recommendations for, whether it's a small business or a large business, on what they need to do to remain resilient, specifically from a cloud security perspective?
Yeah, well, you're speaking our language now. So, resilient, that's a word we use all the time, and it means a lot of things. So maybe I break it down in a few different ways. So if you talk about what that new normal is, from my perspective, more people are remote, and therefore our critical data is more distributed. And it's really, to me, that means that we can no longer rely on a single form of business protection. So this is sort of the protection element of resilient. We have to become more comfortable with the idea of multiple layers of protection. The idea of a silver bullet, it doesn't really exist anymore. We're no longer behind a central firewall. So everyone's in a different place. So to me, that sort of requires multiple approaches to protecting, the company's valuable assets in terms of data, that kind of thing. Second, I think you don't have to go far on the news threads to see that physical and digital threats to the business have increased dramatically. I mean, it's pretty scary. There seems to be a new ransomware, headline every day. Last one being this, the Log4j, Log4Shell vulnerability that is still a big deal, and admins are working to contain and to remediate. So it's real. And again, it does require multiple levels of protection to safeguard security, backup, and disaster recovery. But for what they call 0-day vulnerabilities, like what we just had with this Log4j, it's not really about preventing it. It's more about responding quickly to it. So there's never necessarily one way to, again, back to this idea of a silver bullet. It's all the above. It's people, it's process, and it's tech to make it actually, to get you to a place where your data is safe. The third part that, we look at when we talk about resilience isn't necessarily about data loss or theft. It's, can also mean the ability to just meet your service levels. If you're an IT administrator and you have certain service levels you're looking to meet for your customers at the application level, performance, et cetera, in the new normal, more employees and customers are doing their work, they're purchasing, they're online. Can you make sure that infrastructure that's supporting those activities is ready to support that surge in performance demand, in security demand, while also keeping in mind, that we know that money doesn't go to the sky, right? So companies need to be cognizant of how to keep their infrastructure flexible with these surges in, performance and security, which can, inform and impact their costs. So, their top line, their bottom line, et cetera. So in other words, choosing the right service, that ultimately, is right for your applications and your business and what you expect, your customers, how your customers, engage with you on, online. It's really that simple. In making sure you're not overspending or, in some ways looking at it, not underspending as well.
So last question for you before I wrap up. So what recommendations or what suggestions might you have in terms of what organizations or what ways organizations can train their people? Because you said it right, it's people, and it's understanding the processes, the policies and the systems. How can they train their employees to remain cognizant of security practices while also working from an alternate location?
Yeah, one of the things that we have at Island is a dedicated compliance team, and that's been invaluable. They do, a number of things really well, two of which, number one, is help our customers with their compliance questions and their requirements from a cloud perspective, wherever they are geographically, whatever industry they're in. But, from our perspective, they keep us aware of and cognizant of any potential threats, any current threats, and they keep us on our toes. And I think that's important to call it out exactly like that. They do that through regular communications. They're always consistent with what they're saying. So they're, reiterating over and over again how to operate online remotely so that we're not, you're not subject to, phishing attempts and other things, so when we see an email from the compliance team, we know that, they're doing a great job. They're keeping us aware. Maybe they've seen a new threat or they're aware of a new threat. Maybe the team has prevented a threat so that, we dial it up a little bit. But ultimately it's communication over and over, continuing to train all the employees about what the threats are. And then, again, answering questions and sometimes repetition is critical there, right?
Well, thank you so much for that response. I think our listeners are always looking for, where can I go to find more and to learn more? By chance, what resources can you share with our listeners?
Yeah, so we've got a website that we pack full of things, but let me simplify it a little bit, right? So it's iland.com. There's a resources section, and depending on where you are in your sort of journey, data protection, DR, or even your cloud journey, you can look at, quick resources in terms of data sheets. You can look at more extensive resources in terms of white papers. If you want validation of how customers in your industry maybe have fared, in their attempts to go to the cloud and how, what they've done with Island, we have plenty of customer success stories as well. And then, the all important demonstration. I want to see how this thing works. So we've got plenty of those kinds of resources available too. So really, whatever part of the journey that you're on, there's usually an asset to support that, and make that easy for you to understand what we do for companies and, how we work with them and, that kind of thing. So island.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Asfalis Advisors and Disaster Recovery Journal. Make sure you check out the show notes for this episode to see all the upcoming events, programs, and ways we can support you. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a review, and share it with a friend. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.